All right, ladies and gentlemen, so today we're going to go over what is the worst note on a saxophone, which is that middle open C sharp. The low C sharp is fine, the high C sharp is great, but that middle C sharp, okay, let's take a look. Okay, so we're talking about our open C sharp. So let's first make sure that we have the basics down before we even start trying to fix anything. Make sure that you're using a good reed. A lot of your problems can be instantly fixed just by putting a better reed on the thing. First and foremost, make sure your reed is good. Also, you want to make sure that your saxophone is in really, really good working condition. Everything that's wrong is just going to be amplified. Those problems are just going to be magnified. Kind of goes without saying, but I just want to make sure that you guys know that. Okay, so let's get to it. First thing I want to show you guys is the most popular alternate fingering for an open C sharp. In general, that note is just going to be flat pretty much on every saxophone. Now, before you just run out and start doing this all the time, keep in mind that some of the more modern saxophones, they've really done a lot to fix this issue. So that note, although it is inherently flat, it may not be so flat that this fingering will fix it. It actually might just be a little bit flat. Maybe you can just push in a little bit and then you can just adjust it with your embouchure, because using this fingering is actually going to adjust the pitch quite a bit. So we have this open position here. We add the octave key and we add the 3 key together. Adding the octave key wants to engage this top mechanism here, but when you push the 3 key down, we disengage that and we use this other octave mechanism that's right here. Okay, so an alternative to that, this one is really going to raise the pitch, is to just use the octave key with your low C sharp. That is considerably different. I like to use that fingering with a really, really relaxed embouchure. I want to try and pitch it down because it's going to just go way sharp. But more than that, I generally want to use that fingering when I have a phrase that ends on that as the lowest note. So if that C sharp is the lowest note at the end of a phrase, generally a really melodic phrase, I usually want to use the low C sharp fingering with the octave key. Let's hear how different it sounds when I just use the standard C sharp fingering. Yeah, it pops out quite a bit, as opposed to I have to be really careful making sure that note isn't actually too sharp. Okay, here's what I do more often than anything. I use that standard C sharp cover. It's generally called a C sharp cover, which is the octave key with the 3, but then I'll add 4, 5, and 6 in the right hand. So if I'm coming from a middle D, all I'm doing is just lifting 1 and 2. just sounds the smoothest. Okay, now we just introduced middle D. Middle D has a similar kind of problem, but instead of sounding really open and empty, it can sound really full and stuffy. And that's kind of a problem too. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so we're talking about middle D. I want to show you this alternate fingering. Alternate fingering for your middle stuffy D is just like C natural, but you add the E flat key. So you have C natural and then E flat together. If I'm playing a phrase and the end of that phrase finishes on that top D and I want to go back down, the timbre is much more similar using that alternate D. It has a tendency to be a little bit flat in pitch, but that fixes that middle D, which has a tendency to be sharp. So you can thread the balance however you see fit. All right, let's move on. Okay, let's talk about some great notes on the saxophone. Now, to my ear, middle F sharp on any saxophone is just absolutely amazing. And I think it has to do with how long the wave is and how it actually fits inside the saxophone. In general, the wave extends a little bit beyond the bell or the length. You can figure this out mathematically, but for any saxophone, middle F sharp, it is just the most resonant note on the saxophone. And this is generally how I want to check and tune a saxophone and tune my ear into hearing that kind of resonance. I want to show you an alternate fingering on tenor sax for that middle F sharp. I usually call this flute F sharp. It's just 1, 2, 3, and 6. Sometimes I'll add the E flat key to this. See if you can hear the difference. Here's with the E flat key. I'm being very nitpicky. It's a very, very subtle difference. I generally tend to use that a lot. Also, technically, it's a lot easier to use going back and forth from F sharp to D. Now, in general, if I'm just tuning up, that can be a problem. If I'm playing with other saxophones, that's a concert E. That puts the alto on an open C sharp. But if he's watching this video, we know some alternate fingerings to really give that C sharp more resonance, better pitch. We just have more tools in our toolbox. Okay. All right, let's do 2 more. All right, and I want to show you guys an alternate fingering for palm F, which is inherently a really nasty sounding note. Anyway, this is going to be the high F. Can sound kind of weak. So in general, the most obvious substitute is going to be the front F, just like C with the front key. The cover in the right hand, which is 4, 5, and 6. And the other one is E. The alternate fingering that I have for palm E is really the starting point for learning what to do differently with your embouchure for teaching overtones and altissimo. So I might as well just throw that one in. I've dedicated this video exclusively to alternate fingerings in order to get a better sound, focusing on that C sharp. But I would be remiss if I didn't tell you this one about palm E. Okay, so our standard palm E. This note can come across as really bright, edgy, and thin if we're not careful. So the front E, in my opinion, is the second worst note on a saxophone. Right after that C sharp, that front E, it can just sound kind of wobbly and mushy. It's a weird mechanism that controls that E, especially going from front E to front F. So front E, just like G, but instead of having this first finger, you're using the front key here. It can start to sound like a weird vocal cat thing or something. But at any rate, the fingering that I use as an alternate for this one, a lot. It has a lot of punch, it has a lot of power. It's definitely more suitable to a rock type of thing, or if you're transitioning from the high register into altissimo. All right, and it is just like middle E flat. Okay, so I'm gonna go back and forth between palm E and the overblown E flat. That E substitute definitely requires learning to dial in your embouchure. I'm not really focusing on that so much in this video, but okay, ladies and gentlemen, start with that C sharp. Make sure you got some good reads. That's all I got for you. See ya!